gives us the key. He says in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, and if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. So all that we have to do then is to talk about crucifixion and resurrection. So crucifixion, these are people who they crucify every year. They crucify themselves, or some of them every year, in commemoration and with nails and everything in Philippines. And by the way, none of them die. Crucifixions in particular is one of the most difficult topics to convince Christians with. In fact, I can tell you that it's impossible to actually convince a Christian to convert from Christianity to Islam just basically based only on the crucifixion. The others we can. The other topic, I mean, there's 14 other topics, right? There are 14 other categories, but this particular category is very difficult. Why? Because Quran, God told us in the Quran that وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ, and we believe in Quran, we have faith, but there's no other explanation. There's, مَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ, but there's no other explanation. So who was on the cross? What happened? How did that happen? What was actually exactly that made to appear to them? All of these things, there's no details in Quran, and that's part of the majestic, glorious, feel of Quran, is that Quran doesn't go into these details. It just tells us what's important to us, right? But you can't convince a Christian with that, right? So you'll get that from Christians. You have to be careful. They'll tell you that non-Christian historians all agree that Jesus was crucified. By the way, until now, all of historians except Muslims and some fringe atheists, they don't believe that Jesus was crucified. I mean, they believe that Jesus was crucified. Only Muslims don't believe that Jesus was not crucified at all. Okay, the non-Christian historians, even in the past, Josephus, on the left here, Tacitus, and Lucian. These were historians very old, old in time, early on. Josephus was in the year 80, so about 50 years after Jesus left the scene. Tacitus was about 180, and Lucian was about 180 as well. Josephus is a Jewish historian, actually, and he wrote that there's somebody called Jesus that was stood trial by Pontius Pilate and was placed on the cross in year 1. And but he continued after that and wrote, and his people believe in him so much that because he is the Christ as prophesied in the Old Testament. And that particular statement made a lot of people think that this is an interpolation, that somebody actually added this statement in Josephus' book. And if they can do that to the Word of God, they can do it to the Word of Josephus. So it's not unbelievable, right? And that's regular historians are saying that he's known to be a Jew. He died as a Jew, so it's impossible that he is saying that he's the Christ. Because if he's the Christ, that means he's Christian. So this is definitely an interpolation. But the question is that the statement before it was also an interpolation, that there was somebody called Jesus that was crucified. That's what there is a debate about. Okay, Tacitus and Lucian, I think they're like not primary reports. They heard, or they talked to actual Christians and say, what do you believe in? They said, we believe in somebody, blah blah blah, Christ came and died on the cross. And Tacitus reported that as it is, like this. So it's a true fact. Yeah, they believe in that, but that doesn't mean that he knows for sure that this happened. And Lucian was taking it as a mockery of Christians. That how dare you? How are you crazy idiots? You believe in somebody who died on the cross and he's God or whatever. But he didn't say, right, by any means, that he knows from sources that there was somebody called Jesus that died on the cross. So these are weak, just so you know. So the Christian story about Jesus, I don't think a lot of Muslims actually know the Christian story. The Christian story is that Jesus was a carpenter and a rabbi from Galilee. He performed so many miracles. He had some following. He kept his miracles secret from the Pharisees, the religious establishment in Jerusalem. He said that he was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Around Passover, he instructed his followers to head to Jerusalem. He disrupted some of the blasphemous practices in the temple, which enraged the Jewish authorities. They urged Pilate, the Roman governor of Palestine at the time, to issue an order for his arrest. Jesus and his disciple hid in a house. Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, betrayed him and told the Romans about him, and the Roman authorities arrested him. He stood trial in front of Pilate. Pilate gave the option to the Jews to free one of the prisoners as customary and in honor of the festival. They chose to free the robber and execute Jesus. He was flogged and carried his own cross to Golgotha, the crucifixion area, and he was placed on a cross Friday morning at noon. All of his disciples forsook him and fled. Only his mother and two other women watched. He was taken down dead from off the cross at sunset on Friday, since it was Sabbath. He said different things on the cross. Joseph of Arimathea, one of his rich secret followers, prepared his body for burial. They didn't break his legs, as was customary for all crucified persons before burial, so they don't wake up and dig themselves out of the mass grave. He was placed in a sepulchre above ground tomb in the garden of Joseph, not in a mass grave. On Sunday after Sabbath, the women went to check the tomb and found it empty. He then appeared a few days later to the disciples on the road and the upper room, and to many people by the lake, and then ascended to his Father. The Islamic story is more majestic and glorious. It says that Jesus was a prophet of God. He was born of the Virgin Mary. He was a normal human being. He spoke as a baby. He performed miracles. God sent miraculous table and the feast meal for them. He protected him by making the situation appear to the Jews and the Romans as if they killed him. Quran proclaims that they didn't kill him by crucifixion, and that he was raised to Allah. Most Muslims believe that the traitor disciple, Judas, was transformed to look like Jesus and was crucified. And that last statement is not present in Quran or Hadith. So let's talk first about the differences between the Gospels in the different accounts relating to crucifixion and resurrection, because once you find the differences, then you, as a private investigator, then you're going to start finding things that will actually dispel the myth of that Jesus died on the cross. So you have to arrange the Gospels that way, because Mark was the first Gospel to be written, then Matthew, then Luke, then John. Mark is 70, 80, Luke is 85, and John is 100 AD. So Mark is the closest to Islam. There's not a lot of things that we disagree with in Mark, but in John, it's the most Christian, with the Pauline Christianity that we learned about. So you can see the human side of Jesus is so apparent in Mark, and then as the time goes, when questions are raised, people are saying, he's not God, it's obvious he's not God. John changes the narrative and actually falsified the Bible. So, and the two in the middle is like literally you can see improvement as you go. So in Mark, for example, pre-arrest, he says, I'm very distressed and troubled, Jesus. My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch. He's telling the disciples, protect me. And then he's talking to his God. He's saying, Abba, Father, all things are possible to you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. And he also continues to say, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, and stuff like that. And then he continues. In John, you see that he doesn't even mention the pre-arrest narrative at all, which means that he was not distressed. Okay. Now, in the arrest time, in Mark, he says, Judas Iscariot says to the Romans, I'm going to go in the house, I'm going to kiss one of them. Whoever I'm going to kiss is going to be Jesus. That's Jesus, you arrest him. So that tells you that the Jewish leaders, and the Roman soldiers did not know what Jesus looked like. Okay, so that gives you an idea. Anything could have happened, any for substitution theory and stuff like that. So that's number one. Number two, so remember that kiss, huh? And there was a fight that erupted and stuff like that, and all of the disciples forsook him and fled. They fled, they ran away. Okay? And there's one weird thing here, has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Is there was one disciple that had only a sheet of linen over his body and he was naked. As he was running, the Romans tried to capture him, so they captured the linen sheath and he ran away naked. We have no idea, nobody until now has any idea what this disciple is and why is that even being mentioned as the Word of God, and how is that going to help us in the situation, to understand the situation. And as you go, you can see that in John, it's completely different. Jesus is portrayed as a completely different person. They knock on the door, he opens, and they say, "Who do you want?" They said to the Roman soldiers. The Roman soldiers say, "Jesus of Nazareth." He says, "It is me." And as soon as he says it is me, just by the wind coming out of his mouth, they all fall on the ground. And then they stand up again, and he tells them, "You can take me, but leave my men to go." Very different Jesus, right? That didn't happen. Mark, we're talking now about the trial, okay? In the trial, Pontius Pilate, right? He was trialing him, and in the trial, people were mocking him. They were saying he was blindfolded, and people were saying, "Prophesy, prophesy," meaning make a prophecy for us, make a prophecy. Huh? I mean, they're mocking him. They were spitting on him. He was kneeling on his knee, right? And they were actually bowing in front of him, like moving their heads like this to show as if they're praying to him, and of course that's as a mockery, right? And he didn't say a word in the trial. The only word he said, "That's what you say." What was his crime? The Jews had a crime in their head that they were worried about him changing their practices, right? The false Jewish practices. But that Pilate doesn't care about that. So they went to Pilate and say he claims that he's the king of the Jews, meaning that he's going to make a revolution against the Romans. So that's his crime for the Romans. So that's what he's being tried for. So Pilate said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" So Jesus said, "You said that." That's the only word that Jesus said, okay? But in John, Jesus gives whole paragraphs of talking about, he's the son of the Father and all of these things. And at the end, totally different narrative, although both of them are describing the same situation. And by the way, there's no way John or Mark, I mean, who would come and tell them about what happened in the trial anyway? So Pontius Pilate says in John, "I found no guilt in him," right? This is very important. He actually decided, according to John, that Jesus is not guilty. So Pontius Pilate is not the bad guy. It's the Jews that the bad guys. Of course, both of them were the bad guys, but I'm just saying, you have to imagine, when was John writing? John was writing in the year 100. That's 30 years after the big revolution, the Jewish revolution, where the Romans came in and killed the Jews and the Jewish Christians, and expelled them out of Palestine and destroyed the temple. So John is trying to show that the Romans, or the representative of the Romans, is the good guy, and the Jews are the bad ones, because they're not there anymore, the Jews. And John, whoever wrote this, is not John, obviously. This is 100 years. So somebody, that's called the Gospel according to John. Somebody wrote it as if John had said it. So basically, so Pontius Pilate found no guilt. So the Jews said to Pontius Pilate, "If you don't condemn him, you're not the friend of Caesar. We're gonna go tell Caesar." So he got scared. Oh my God, they're gonna tell Caesar. Let me kill him. Okay. So he said, "Okay, we'll kill him." And then he tried to get him out again. So he came and said, "By the way, it's Passover. I'm going to release one of the two people that are condemned to death." There was somebody called Barabbas and somebody called Jesus, right? These two were condemned to death today at the same time. So I'm going to release one of them for you, and the other one I'm going to kill in honor of the Passover. So the Jews said, kill Jesus and release Barabbas. Barabbas was a thief. Okay, so and when he told them that, when they told him that, he said, he Pontius Pilate again. He got water and he washed his hand off that. He said, I'm washing my hand off the blood of this innocent man. Okay, 100% didn't happen. 100% didn't happen this way. The history tells us about Pontius Pilate that he was a cruel governor of Palestine at the time, and he didn't care what the Jews will tell him. These were his subjects. You know, in fact, if they tell him something, he'll do the opposite. So and then the Jews went even further. They said, "May his blood be a curse on us, or may his blood be on us and our offsprings till the end of time. And we're responsible for his blood from here till the end of time." Again, nobody says that. This didn't happen. Okay, but anyway, we continued, and then they wrote on his Pontius Pilate wrote on his cross on the top. It is not known that the Romans wrote anything on the crosses, but they wrote on the cross, "The King of the Jews," in 3 different languages. What is this, a celebration? It's impossible that he did that as well, right? But the funny thing is the word Barabbas, or the name Barabbas. Barabbas, the name, that's the thief that was released. The word Bar in Hebrew means Ibn, or son of. And the word Abbas, Abba, means father. So the meaning of the name of that guy is the son of the father. And Jesus was called by Christians the son of the father. So it's very weird, and it's impossible that this is a coincidence, and it tells me that the whole thing is allegory and it didn't happen. In crucifixion, right? So in crucifixion, there is somebody called the centurion. The centurion is the guy who decides that he tortures the person on the cross and actually decides at the end that he's dead, pronounce him dead. And then so what they usually do is that they put the patient, or they put the guy on the cross. They either nail him or tie him to the cross. And the way people die on the cross, in order to die on the cross, you have to spend days on the cross, right? Days on the cross. Because people can stay without food and water, they wither away, they become weak, but they don't actually die completely, except maybe 3 days, 4 days on the cross, and then they die. So that's why it's a bad death, right? Because it's torture. But they hang. But the way they actually die is by asphyxiation. What happened is that they tie them up, or they nail them, and they're hanging. So if they're hanging like this, they have a shelf for their feet, and that shelf, every time they hang like this, they can't breathe. So they push a little bit against the shelf to every time they get weak and their hands get weak and all this, and to breathe. And they keep doing that for 3 days, right? And at the end of if somebody lingers more than 3 days or something, then they then they break his leg. Another form of torture. They hit him so hard on his leg with a metal rod or something, they break his leg. So when they break his leg, he can't push anymore on the shelf, and he dies by asphyxiation. One of the worst tortures that can happen to a human being, right? So according to some prophecy in the Old Testament, it says that Christ will never have his legs broken. So according to Christian tradition, they never, and that's an agreement among all of the Gospels, that they didn't break his legs. Jesus, his legs was not broken. The other detail here is that the whole point is to keep them on the cross for a long time, to torture. There's no point in actually getting them and keep them for a few hours and then killing them or something like that. So they put him on the cross at 12 noon, according to the Gospel. And that means that if they put him on the 12 noon, they had to bring him down before 6 o'clock at night, which is the time of sunset, because as soon as sunset on Friday, uh, becomes comes in, that means Sabbath started, and that's a huge problem for Jews. So it could be that the Romans put these three people, Jesus and two thieves next to him, um, and put them on a cross, and with Friday morning, and they had to bring him down. So what they did for the two thieves around him, they broke their legs. When the time approached the night, they broke their legs and they died. Right? But when Jesus was pronounced dead, they were alive. Like Jesus died first, and then these two died later. When they had to break their legs. And the centurion looked like this and said, "Wow, he is dead." He marveled. Why is he? He died already? It was in 3 hours he died. And then it said that immediately when that happened, there was a solar eclipse in Matthew Gospel. Solar eclipse that happened. And also an earthquake that happened. And when these two things happened, they were in a rush to kill the two other thieves, and then they brought him down, and they gave his body to Joseph of Arimathea. When Pontius Pilate knew about the death of Jesus early on, he said, "Wow, he died already? 3 hours after he was placed on the cross?" He marveled. That's written in the Gospel. Also, the wife of Pontius Pilate had a dream about Jesus one day before, and she sent him a letter saying, or told him, "Please don't condemn this pious man." So she was a follower of Jesus. And Pontius Pilate, we know that he is a cruel governor, but he said Jesus is innocent. So do you think that the cruel governor, the strong governor, cannot do anything until his soldiers, lower him down when he's not dead or whatever, anything like that? Potentially, right? He wants to do his will. He's not happy with it. He's being forced to do something, right? Moreover, the centurion, who's actually the guy that was torturing Jesus, and he's the one that pronounced him dead. And as soon as he pronounced him dead, he said, "Indeed, this man is the Son of God." That tells us that the centurion himself was also a follower of Jesus, or at least converted at the time. So it's in his best interest to actually lower the guy and bring him down from the cross when he's not dead. Moreover, Mark in his gospel says that at the end he was in a lot of pain. So the followers of Jesus approached him and put a cotton filled with an anesthetic. They put it on a long stick and pushed it all the way up. So he drank that anesthetic, and after he drank the anesthetic, he went to sleep. If you work in a hospital or ICU, you'll see that half the people in the ICU look like they're dead. If you're in 2,000 years ago, you'll pronounce them dead. There's no signs of life in them. You don't have a stethoscope 2,000 years ago, so anybody would drink this anesthetic, maybe he'll look like he's dead. His breathing slowed down to like a minute or something, and he looks like he died. So that happened, and then they pronounced him dead after. So very weird questions all over the place there. But of course, in John, he doesn't like that, and people started questioning, how did he die? So he added something. Only John, out of 40 Gospels that were around at the time, we have 40 Gospels. All of them were rejected, by the way. He's the only one that mentioned a spear. So a Roman soldier, just out of being angry at him, I guess, or I don't know, he gave him a spear in his belly. So that was the reason he died. Nobody else ever said this in any other gospel, and it's not true. And in fact, if I'm the centurion, I would actually punish that Roman soldier, because the whole point of putting him on the cross is that to torture him before he dies, not to finish his life by finishing him with a spear. Now the next is resurrection and the post-resurrection. They put him in a tomb, right? Joseph of Arimathea was actually a secret rich follower of Jesus. He went to Pilate and said, "Please give me permission to take his body." So typically they break their legs and put him in a mass grave and cover it. That's it, done in the ground. No way, nobody's gonna survive that. So he said, no, give me. He took the body. He prepped the body with things that, with herbs that promote healing, right? He said, according to the Bible, it like 100 pounds of herbs. Okay, and then he took him and placed him in a sepulchre, which is an above ground tomb in his garden that was prepared for him, for Joseph himself when he dies. And he left him there. And then the Jewish authorities did not go to, because it was the Sabbath, right? They did not go to Pilate to tell him anything until Sunday came, and they went to him in the Gospel of Matthew. They went to him and said, "You've got to put guards on the tomb for fear of the second deception become worse than the first deception." Somebody tell me, what is the first deception? What is the first deception? So it must be that they're talking about something, whether somebody else was crucified or he didn't die or was lowered down, not dead. That's what they mean by first deception. It has to be, right? So then, of course, they put guards on the tomb. Did the guards on the tomb looked inside or removed the stone to look inside to see what's going on? They just stayed outside the tomb. So he could have left already. Who knows? Also, when the progression of the Gospels are amazing, but in the Gospel of Matthew and Luke, both of them, Jesus was asked a question when he was alive and said, the people asked him for a miracle, another miracle, I guess, towards the end. So he cursed them and say, "You're an adulterous generation, and you want another miracle? I am not going to give you any other miracle other than the sign of Jonah." Jonah is Prophet Yunus, who was swallowed by the whale. So as he said, as he lived 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so as the Son of Man, which is Jesus himself, will be 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the earth. Okay, and that is taken by Christians as that, see, he was actually crucified and died in the belly of the earth, and that is the biggest sign, which is the resurrection sign. Okay, but there's so many, so people always concentrate on the 3 days and 3 nights. That this is the actual miracle, but there's no miracle in the time. The miracle is actually in that he's alive. Both of them are alive in the belly of the whale and the belly of the earth. And especially if we can show you that when he says 3 days and 3 nights, it didn't actually happen in the case of Jesus. Wasn't he crucified on Friday and was taken down Friday night? Then he spent Saturday in the tomb, and then Sunday morning the women came and found him not in the tomb. Is this 3 days and 3 nights? It's not. And if you look at Jonah, he was alive in the belly of the whale. Jesus was alive in the belly of the earth. Okay, so it's obvious that he means that he will be alive. It's not that he's gonna die and then get resurrected. In Mark, when the women went to the tomb, they found it open. They looked inside. They didn't find the body, but they found a young man sitting, wearing white clothes. And he said, "What are you looking for?" They said, "Jesus of Nazareth." He said, "He's alive." And he went to Galilee, meet him there as he told you. And that's it. We don't know who's that man at all. But in Matthew, they saw angels. In Luke, they saw even better things, but in John, it's more elaborate. There's no, Mary Mary Magdalene was went to the tomb, and when she didn't find Jesus inside the tomb, she went outside, and she looked. She found the gardener walking, and when she saw the gardener, she saw it's Jesus. So then she asked him, "Where is Jesus?" He said, he talked to her, and he said her name, Miriam, right? And the way he said Miriam, she heard the voice of Jesus in him, so she knew that he's Jesus. She clinged to him, and he said, "Don't touch me," meaning that it hurts, as I have not ascended to my Father yet. Go to the disciples and tell them to meet me in Galilee, uh, and that I, yeah, announcing this, that you have seen the Lord, and all this, and meet me in Galilee, and then until I ascend to my Father and their Father, or and your Father. Okay. Now, for the post-resurrection narrative, um, the in Mark it says that when Jesus met them after, or when Jesus met, or he didn't meet Jesus in Mark, right? He only saw the man in white, and he told them to meet them in Galilee. They were amazed and scared, and he told them to not tell anybody. So then they ran away, and they were that's what the gospel says. They ran away, and they were so scared that they didn't tell anybody. And that was the end of Mark's gospel. And the next week we're going to talk about what happened after this. They added so many things after that to Mark's gospel, because nobody could believe that this is actually the end of the story. But the story kept on improving and improving and improving, right? Until Luke, for example, it says that Jesus went to the upper room, the room that they were, the house that they were hiding in. And when he went there, he told them, he appeared to his disciples. He suddenly appeared and said, "Shalom alaikum, peace be on you." So they were spooked. They were like so scared of him, they thought he's a ghost. And then he said, "Don't worry, I'm not a ghost. Handle me, and touch me," basically. And then, so they touched him and know that he's not a ghost, right? And he said, "Do you have any food to eat?" So they gave him fish and honeycomb. He ate the fish and honeycomb, right? Which means what? That he had to go to the bathroom at some point. He's not a resurrected body. He's trying to tell him, "I'm not a resurrected body, touch me." Okay? Now, in John, there was a lot of additions that were added. Thomas was not there, and Thomas had, was a doubting Thomas, and he had to touch the wound, and all of these things. And all of the end, the last 12 verses in Mark, and all of the last 8 verses in John are said to be forgery. They're not. Somebody else wrote them other than the original writer of the gospel. Obviously, to answer some theological questions. So, what does the Old Testament say about Jesus, about the Christ? It says that God will be saving saving defense to His anointed one. In Corinthians, they bring pieces of the Old Testament. Paul writes pieces of the Old Testament and it says, "Do not touch my anointed ones." Okay, so they touched them, more than touched them. And in Hebrew, which is one of the New Testaments, right? It says that Jesus had loud crying and tears to the one that is able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his piety. So what is the manifestation of being heard? He died. Okay, so I'm going to summarize to you the 33 proofs that Jesus never died and on the cross. We talked about them, so I'm going to run through them. Okay, But 33, if you can't choose one, or if you're not convinced by any of them, then you're nuts. Okay. Number one, the disciples forsook him and fled, so we don't have witnesses. He stayed only 3 to 6 hours on the cross, not enough time to die. They didn't break his legs. They didn't place him in a mass grave. Joseph of Arimathea, a rich secret follower, he's the one that got his body. The centurion who pronounced him dead was a believer. Pilate marveled how come he died in 3 hours. Pilate didn't want to condemn him from the beginning. Pilate's wife was a believer. The Jewish Sanhedrin, the leaders, did not ask Pilate for tomb guards except after the Sabbath. The guy's name, the thief's name is Barabbas, the son of the father, is weird. And the sign of Jonah doesn't coincide with the time, so it must be meant to coincide with being alive in a place that you should not be alive. Number 13, the anesthetic that they gave him. That's what made him look dead, right? Number 14, the earthquake that happened. Number 15, the solar eclipse. Number 16, the Sabbath, that they had to bring him down because of the Sabbath. 17, the lie of the spear that was just mentioned in 1 out of 40 Gospels. 18, the young man in the tomb who said he's alive, right? Number 19, Mary Magdalene hurt him when she clung to him, so that means he's not resurrected. The resurrected bodies do not come out in the best shape. They don't come out, it's not like they're going to come out without a leg, for example. Number 20, improvement in the story between Mark to John. In fact, in John, he said, instead of saying, I'm going to pray to my Father, pray to my Father in Luke, in John he said, I'm coming in to meet my fate and be crucified, and what do I say? Do I say, Father, don't give me this cup? He's actually the opposite, right? Number 21, Mary Magdalene thought he's a gardener. That means he's in camouflage. In the upper room, they came to him and ate, and actually they touched him, so he's not a resurrected body. And he went to the bathroom, must be, right? Thomas didn't even make sense. 24, he prayed to God to save him. So God must have saved him. I've never seen a prophet that prayed to God and mentioned in the scripture and then not saved. God guaranteed in the Old Testament that he will protect his Messiah, and that he heard his prayer. What's in it for Prophet Muhammad to claim 600 years ago that Jesus didn't die on the cross? Well, if he was writing this and it's not a revelation, he could have said, okay, he died, okay, he's gone, right? Number 27, who anoints the dead body? Why did the women go to the tomb with more herbs to anoint a dead body? That is not in the Jewish custom or the Jewish customs or the Jewish religion. So they must have thought that he could be alive, right? He ate the fish. That means he went to the bathroom. He was in camouflage the whole time. His disciples had doubted when Matthew said they worshipped but doubted. Why didn't he appear to his enemies? He only appeared to his friends only. And I'm going to add, why did the people, the two followers of him, that they were going on the way to Amos, on the road to Amos, and they walked miles and miles with him, talking to him the whole time, and then when they sat down to eat, and the way he broke the bread, it reminded them of Jesus. Doesn't make any sense. And Barabbas, the son of the Father, and God said that in the glorious Quran. That's enough reasons to think that at least he did not die on a cross. So what are the theories about crucifixion? There is a stolen body theory, that maybe his disciples stole his body on the Sabbath, right? Remember, during his teachings, he was saying things about, one of the things that made the Jews, hate him was that he was working in the Sabbath, healing people on the Sabbath, and his explanation was basically the people are more important than the Sabbath, right? So they could have stolen his body on the Sabbath. Then the story changed after that. It could be a hallucination theory. Like people, a lot of people see dead loved ones after they die, especially in the first few days. It could be a mistaken identity, which is a substitution theory. like somebody else died in his place, like Simon of Cyrene, Didymus, Judas, Thomas, and Judas Iscariot. So Judas Iscariot, it's impossible, right? Because Judas Iscariot would have screamed and said, "I'm not Jesus." There's a mistake here. Okay. Now Simon of Cyrene or Didymus, Judas, Thomas could have. Simon of Cyrene is the guy that he's from Cyrene is Trablus in Libya, Tripoli. So he went to, he was there and he helped him carry the cross. So he could have just, okay, in the thick of it, and in the feast, he was just taken and crucified. And he could have done that willingly as a follower of Jesus. That's fine. That is a possibility, obviously, right? And then Jesus was raised by God. So that's a possibility. Didymus, Judas, Thomas is another huge story that we can talk about at some point. But Didymus in Greek means the twin. Thomas in Hebrew means, or Aramaic means the twin. And Judas is said to be the brother of Jesus from Mary after she got married to Joseph. So there is somebody, and he was a disciple. So there is somebody that is called Judas, but not Judas Iscariot, the other Judas, that he looked exactly like Jesus. That's why they call him the twin, Judas the twin. It's very, very, very weird, and it raises a lot of options here that he could have been crucified instead of Jesus, because he looks like him. But the whole substitution theory doesn't make sense from another aspect. Not that we need to find somebody that was crucified instead of him. It doesn't make sense that if the Jews and the Christians are being condemned by God because they're saying, or the Jews are saying that we killed the prophet Jesus, and the Christians believe that he died, okay, and God is saying that he's not dead, or he didn't die, and they're being condemned for this thought. What did they do wrong? Whether it's Didymus, Judas, Thomas that looked like him, or any one of the others that God make him look like Jesus, right? If that's what we understand, then the people who are watching, they will report that Jesus died, was killed. If you, it doesn't make any sense. If you see me on the cross, you're gonna say that Khalid is on the cross, and then he died. You're gonna report that, then you're gonna believe in that. No force on earth is gonna make you not believe what you've seen with your eyes. But imagine if that wasn't me, that was somebody else that made to look like me. So what is God is like fooling them, tricking them? It doesn't make any sense. Whatever you're seeing with your eyes, whatever you saw with your eyes, it could be a fabrication story. Like the whole story from the beginning is a whole fabrication. Like Osiris. Osiris is a whole mythical story in Egypt. It was made up from scratch, right? So it could be that this happened. Obviously, there's something to it, but the whole thing flourished completely. So it could be one small thing that almost happened or didn't ever happen, and they made a whole story about it, and one person copied from the other. That's also a possibility. There was no crucifixion at all at the time. Okay? Or it could be the wrong tomb theory, which is not an Islamic theory. Okay, they went to a wrong tomb, found it empty, and they created all of these myths about it. Or it could be the swoon theory. The swoon theory is a resuscitation theory, that he went on the cross, but he was lowered down very quickly and resuscitated. Okay, so let's see what the Bible says about that. Mark 14:50 says, and they all left him and fled. This is important here, because that's what Quran is saying, that there is a lot of dhann, meaning a lot of doubt, because they weren't there. So this verse in Quran, we're going to finish with it, is the strongest verse in the Quran. I love it. It's so emphatic and it's so decisive. And it says that he didn't die. He is talking about what the Jews said about Jesus. But if we want to understand the verse, we have to go the two verses before it. And then we'll come to it. So the two verses before it, it says, قولهم it talks about the Jews are being condemned because they killed the prophets, and they said to the Prophet Muhammad that their hearts are closed, they're not going to listen to him, and they also accused Mary of indecent act, and then this verse comes and says, which is An-Nisa 157, okay. وقولهم إنا قتلنا المسيح عيسى ابن مريم رسول الله وما قتلوه وما صلبوه ولكن شبه لهم وإن الذين اختلفوا فيه لفي شك منه ما لهم به من علم إلا اتباع الظن وما قتلوه يقينا. And for boasting, continuing what he said in the previous sentences, that they are condemned for boasting, we killed the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, the messenger of God. But they neither killed nor crucified him. It was only made to appear so. Even those who argue for the crucifixion are in doubt. They have no knowledge whatsoever, only making assumptions. They certainly did not kill him. Okay? Now let's see the traditional Muslim understanding. Again, this verse doesn't tell us what happened on the cross. Okay? It just emphatically tells us that they didn't kill him on the cross. But let me tell you, and then there's no hadith that actually talks about what happened on the cross, who was crucified. But so what you're hearing, or what is the general agreement among Muslims, is only from scholars, which they can be wrong, they can be right, and they don't have no basis, actually no sources. Their sources were Christian sources from the Levant when Islam went there. So the classic explanation of this verse is that they didn't kill him, nor they put him on the cross even. He was not even put on the cross. But somebody made to look like him. And that's how they explain it, and that's it. And I told you before, I do not accept the substitution theory, and nobody should really. You'll be laughed out of the room if you tell that to anybody. What do you mean? What do you mean? So you're telling me that the people who were there at the crucifixion site saw Jesus being killed. Of course, it wasn't Jesus; it was somebody else that made look like Jesus, but they didn't commit any fault. They saw Jesus and reported the truth, that Jesus, from their point of view, that Jesus was killed. They don't know what happened. And this verse came 600 years later, so it's impossible to hold them accountable for something like this. Okay? So we have to think of another option. But I'm going to highlight two things. It says here, we killed the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, the messenger of God. These two words in light blue, the Messiah, the messenger of God. Okay? Do you think the Jews believe that he's the Messiah? Or they believe that he's a messenger of God? Of course they don't. But why are they saying these two words, the Messiah and the messenger of God? To mock him even more. They say, ha ha ha, we killed your Messiah, we killed your messenger of God. And that means that he's not the Messiah, because he was killed. Because God will protect the Messiah. So that's what the Jews are saying. Okay, so we understand that. But they neither killed nor crucified him. So we have to understand what is the definition of the word crucifixion. Crucifixion, almost 99.9% of the time, result in death. So as drowning, for example, drowning results in death. So if I say to somebody, not that somebody was bobbing in the water, I'm talking about somebody drowned, was found drowned, right? It was pushed by the sea, by the waves. So if somebody was found drowned, and you say, Mr. Smith drowned, and that's it, and you leave. Hi guys, Mr. Smith drowned. What am I going to infer from this? That Mr. Smith died by drowning, right? There's no other. If you say Mr. Smith was crucified, then I'm going to know, okay, he died by crucifixion. Mr. Smith was stoned. That means he died by stoning. Mr. Smith had his head cut off. That means he died by having his head cut off. If you want to qualify what you're saying, and you say something weird happened, so you say, Mr. Smith drowned, but then he was resuscitated in the hospital and woke up. Then I understand. Or you tell me, Mr. Smith was crucified and he was resuscitated, and so on. So the word crucifixion in both Arabic and English, there's no need for another word because 99.9% of the time results in death. So it means the two things. Crucifixion means dead by crucifixion, or the act of putting somebody on the cross. Both, it means the two of them. But most of the time it means dead by crucifixion, because that's the most common thing that happens. And it includes both actions, placing on the cross and dying. Right? So that's what it means here in Quran. But they neither killed him nor crucified him. Okay? Which means what? Which means that why would God repeat himself and say he wasn't killed and he wasn't killed by crucifixion? Why would he repeat himself? Because of what the part of the verse before it. The part of the verse before it says that we killed your Messiah. Ha ha ha, we killed your Messiah. They're mocking them. And if you remember, the Jews in their belief, that they believe that anybody who dies on the cross is a curse. So that God is telling them, you didn't kill him, the regular killing, but also you didn't put him on the cross. You didn't kill him on the cross, which is in your belief that it becomes a curse. You didn't make him a curse as well, right? So the two different types of killing mean two different things. Different things. So killing is killing, but killing on the cross means worse, a curse. So he said, you never killed him and you never crucified him. That's why it's repeated twice. Okay? It was only made to appear to them. What was made to appear to them? It's up to you and your imagination. If you want to believe in the substitution theory, God believes that we have brains. You know, God will not fool people and deceive people, right? So he doesn't have to explain himself. But some brains went to that conclusion, that God deceived people. No, it was made to appear to them that he's dead on the cross. Okay? So, you know, until now, the two explanations, the traditional explanation and this explanation can, you know, both of them can be understood. But I think the last part of the verse completely seals the deal. God is repeating himself again. He says, they certainly did not kill him. Okay? Why didn't he say, they certainly did not kill him nor crucify him? Again. No. Here he's trying to qualify. Remember I told you when you say, Mr. Smith has been crucified but has been resuscitated. That's what God is trying to tell you. Is that they didn't crucify him, and he's telling you, they certainly did not kill him on the cross. So he's saying, and the emphasis here on the word kill. You can say that the verse is on emphasis on the word him. They certainly did not kill him, so they killed somebody else. That could be, But I believe that the emphasis here is on the word kill. They certainly did not kill him, right? So he was alive on the cross. So what could have happened? Allahu Alam. And by the way, the Muslim position on this, just so you don't say I'm not trying to change anything here. The Muslim position is that Allahu Alam. We don't know. God doesn't want us to know this, or doesn't, it's not an important thing to us. But we, as good Muslims, we have to investigate every verse in Quran to the maximum we can, right? So at this point, we can say Allahu Alam, but also we can say there is a big possibility that he was placed on the cross with some lies and modifications of the whole story. You can do whatever you want, but there is no smoke without fire. All of these trials and pre-trial and cross and all that, it cannot be all made up. Like, it's very difficult. So it's probably these things happen in some form or fashion. He was placed on the cross for maybe an hour or less than an hour, and then God saved him with the huge last miracle that he gave Jesus, which is an earthquake and a solar eclipse, right? That happened, and that made them bring him down from the cross, and the whole thing went awry, and then he survived. That's a great possibility. It actually it makes two things possible. Number one, this verse makes this verse more miraculous, in my opinion, and makes it, no contradiction with the verse. Number two, it doesn't destroy the whole Christian narrative. It leaves the main points, but it removes all of the details, and at the same time it reached the Islamic conclusion, which he was not killed by crucifixion. God protecting him. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. Thank you for listening.